In the harsh mountains of Apache territory, where winter winds carry both death and whispers of the spirit world, a warrior named Running Bear faces his greatest battle, not against enemy tribes or cavalry soldiers, but against the silence that fills his lodge since his wife Morning Star died, bringing their 4 children into this world. For 3 moons, he has struggled alone, watching his babies grow weaker while his own spirit withers like autumn leaves. The tribal elders offer help, but grief has made him stubborn. He cannot accept that Morning Star is truly gone, cannot believe the Great Spirit would take her and leave him with this impossible burden. Then, as the spring winds begin to blow across the sacred mountains, a young woman appears at his fire, speaking of visions and claiming the dead have sent her. But is she real, or has loneliness finally broken his mind? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Running Bear's fingers trace the worn edges of Morning Star's medicine pouch, the leather soft from countless touches over the moons since her death. Inside, sacred herbs and stones that she had gathered during their courtship still carried her scent. Sage and sweetgrass mixed with something indefinably her. He pressed the pouch against his chest, willing it to hold some fragment of her spirit, some power to protect the 4 tiny lives that depended on him. The lodge that had once echoed with Morning Star's laughter now held only the constant chorus of hungry cries. For babies, born in the space between one heartbeat and the next, as if the Great Spirit had decided to balance the taking of 1 life with the giving of 4. The irony was not lost on Running Bear. He had always been a man who understood balance, in hunting, in warfare, in the careful negotiations between tribes. But this balance felt cruel, demanding more than he possessed. He had built this lodge with his own hands during the season of their engagement, when Morning Star's father finally agreed that a young warrior with more courage than horses might be worthy of his daughter. Together, they had chosen each stone for the fire pit, each pole for the frame, each hide for the walls. Morning Star had insisted on weaving the willow cradle board herself, laughing as she crafted sections for the children they would someday have. She had made 4 sections, he realized now with a start. 4 sections, as if she had known. The cradle board sat in the corner, its intricate beadwork catching the firelight. Morning Star had worked on it through the long winter nights, her fingers moving with the patient precision that characterized everything she touched. Blue beads for the sky that would watch over their children, white for the snow that would teach them purity, red for the blood that connected them to their ancestors. She had explained each choice to him as she worked, her voice soft with dreams of babies who would grow strong in this very lodge. Now those babies lay in the cradle board she had made, their thin cries a constant reminder of what he had gained and lost in the same terrible moment. The tribal medicine man had told him that birth and death often walked hand in hand, that the veil between worlds grew thin when new life struggled to enter. But understanding the spiritual truth did nothing to ease the practical burden of 4 infants who needed feeding every few hours, whose tiny bodies demanded warmth and comfort he struggled to provide. The other women of the tribe had offered help. White Dove, the chief's sister, had appeared the day after Morning Star's burial with clean cloths and offers to take the babies until Running Bear could find a new wife. Gray Cloud's widow had brought goat's milk and gentle words about accepting the support of his people. Even young Prairie Flower, barely past her own naming ceremony, had shyly offered to help with the endless washing and feeding. But Running Bear had refused them all. Some part of him, the part that still heard Morning Star's voice in the wind through the lodge poles, insisted that accepting help meant accepting her death as final. As long as he struggled alone, as long as he maintained this impossible vigil, perhaps the Great Spirit would recognize his dedication and return her to him. It was not rational thinking, and he knew it, but grief had made rational thinking as distant as the stars. The babies stirred in their cradle board, and Running Bear rose to tend them with movements that had become automatic over the 3 moons since their birth. First the girl with Morning Star's delicate features, then her brother who already showed signs of inheriting his father's broad shoulders, then the twin boys whose identical faces reminded Running Bear painfully of his own brother, lost to cavalry bullets 5 winters past. Each child had needs as individual as their emerging personalities. The girl, whom he had named Bright Moon in honor of her mother's luminous spirit, preferred to be held close against his chest. Her brother, Strong Wolf, seemed content to observe the world with serious dark eyes that missed nothing. The twins, whom Morningstar had named in her final moments, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, demanded constant attention, as if they understood that their entrance into the world had come at too high a price. The mountain spring provided fresh water, and Running Bear had learned to prepare the goat's milk that sustained his children, though they grew thinner each day despite his efforts. His own meals consisted of dried meat and whatever roots he could gather during the brief periods when all 4 babies slept simultaneously. Sleep had become a luxury he could rarely afford, stolen in moments between feedings, always light enough that the slightest cry would wake him. The spring winds arrived with the scent of distant rain and something else, something that made Running Bear lift his head from the fire where he was warming goat's milk for the evening feeding. The babies had been restless all day, crying in turns as if sensing a change in the air that he could not yet understand. She appeared as silently as morning mist, materializing from the shadows beyond his fire's reach. One moment Running Bear was alone with his 4 charges. The next a young woman stood at the edge of his camp, her presence so natural it seemed she had always been there. What struck him first was not her beauty, though she possessed it in abundance, but the immediate quiet that fell over his lodge. For babies who had known nothing but hunger and discomfort for 3 moons suddenly stilled, their cries fading to peaceful silence. The woman was perhaps 20 summers, with the graceful bearing of someone raised in the old ways. Her buckskin dress was simple but well-made, decorated with beadwork in patterns Running Bear recognized but could not quite place. Dark hair fell in 2 neat braids past her shoulders, and her eyes held depths that spoke of wisdom beyond her apparent years. But it was what she carried that made Running Bear's breath catch in his throat. A white eagle feather hung from a leather cord around her neck, its pristine surface catching the firelight like captured starshine. In all his years, Running Bear had seen only 3 such feathers, each carried by holy men who claimed direct communication with the spirit world. Apache tradition held that white eagle feathers could only be given by the dead to guide the living, and they appeared only when the boundary between worlds grew thin. "I have come because of the children," she said, her voice carrying the soft cadence of the mountain dialects, "and because she who sleeps with the ancestors grows restless in her worry for them." Running Bear felt his hand move instinctively to the war knife at his belt, though something deep in his spirit whispered that this woman posed no threat. "Who are you? What tribe claims you?" Instead of answering directly, she moved closer to the cradle board where his 4 children lay in unprecedented quiet. They watched her with the focused attention babies rarely showed, their dark eyes following her movements as if recognizing something familiar in her presence. "Your daughter has her mother's eyes," the woman observed, gently touching Bright Moon's tiny hand. "And this one," she indicated Strong Wolf, "will grow to have his father's strength but his mother's gentle heart." Running Bear stepped closer, his warrior instincts warring with a desperate hope he dared not acknowledge. "How could you know this? How could you know anything about their mother?" The woman straightened, meeting his gaze with eyes that seemed to hold starlight. "Because she who gave them life has not traveled far into the spirit world. She lingers at the boundary, held by love and worry for what she left behind. In my dreams, she speaks of children who cry without comfort and a husband who grieves without healing." Dreams. Running Bear's voice carried skepticism born of 3 moons of disappointment. Too many well-meaning visitors had offered explanations for his loss, spiritual comfort that felt empty against the reality of 4 hungry babies and his own exhaustion. "More than dreams," the woman replied calmly. She reached into a small pouch at her side and withdrew a collection of items that made Running Bear step back in shock. A braid of sweetgrass tied with the exact knots Morningstar had favored. A small piece of turquoise carved in the shape of a bear, identical to one he had given his wife during their courtship. A dried wildflower he recognized as coming from the meadow where he had first told Morningstar he loved her. "Where did you get these things?" His voice was barely a whisper. "From one who wishes her beloved to know that love does not end with the final breath, that sometimes the spirits send help in forms the living can accept." She tucked the items away with reverent care. "I am called Gentle Rain, and I have traveled far because visions told me of 4 children who need what I can give, and a man who has forgotten that accepting help is not the same as accepting defeat. The babies began to stir, but instead of the usual chorus of cries, they made soft cooing sounds that Running Bear had not heard since their birth. Gentle Rain moved among them with practiced ease, her touch bringing calm where there had been only distress. "Let me help you care for them tonight," she said simply. "Tomorrow you can decide if my presence brings peace or merely adds to your burdens." Running Bear agreed to let Gentle Rain stay for one night only, though his reasons were more practical than trusting. The babies had not cried since her arrival, and exhaustion had worn his resistance thin as old leather. He watched from across the fire as she tended each child with movements that spoke of deep familiarity, as if she had cared for them since birth rather than having just met them. When Bright Moon fussed, Gentle Rain lifted her with the exact motion Morning Star had used, supporting the head just so, holding the tiny body close against her shoulder. When Strong Wolf grew restless, she hummed a melody that made Running Bear's heart clench with recognition. It was the same song Morning Star had sung while working at her loom, a tune her own mother had taught her about children growing strong like young trees reaching toward the sun. The night passed in a peace Running Bear had not known since his children's birth. For the first time in 3 moons, all 4 babies slept through the darkness, their breathing steady and content. He dozed fitfully by the fire, jolting awake whenever instinct told him someone should be crying, only to find them still sleeping peacefully under Gentle Rain's watchful care. As dawn painted the sky the color of salmon, Running Bear woke to find Gentle Rain sitting at Morning Star's weaving loom. His breath caught as he saw what she was doing. The half-finished blankets that had haunted him for months, projects Morning Star had started for their unborn children, were being completed with identical skill and pattern. Her fingers moved with the same rhythm Morning Star had used, creating the same tight, even weave that had made his wife's work prized throughout the tribe. "How do you know the pattern?" he asked, his voice hoarse with sleep and emotion. Gentle Rain looked up from her work, her fingers never pausing in their motion. "She shows me in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking. The blankets were to be gifts for each child, this blue one for your daughter, to wrap her in the protection of the sky spirits. The brown for Strong Wolf, to ground him in the strength of the earth." Running Bear moved closer, studying the work with growing amazement. Not only did Gentle Rain know the patterns, but her technique was flawless. Even the tension of her weaving matched Morning Star's perfectly, making it impossible to tell where his wife's work ended and the stranger's began. "The green one is for Swift Arrow," she continued, indicating the 3rd blanket. Morning Star worried he would be too eager to explore the world, so she wove in symbols of safe travel and wise choices. "And this yellow one for Singing Wind." She hoped he would grow to be a storyteller and keeper of traditions. She named them before. Running Bear couldn't finish the sentence. He had never told anyone what Morning Star whispered with her final breaths, the names she had chosen in those last moments when her spirit flickered between worlds. Before she crossed over, yes, she spoke their names to me in my first vision, along with their purposes and the gifts they would bring to the people. Gentle Rain's hands stilled on the loom. She also spoke of their father's pain and how it threatens to consume the very love that should sustain him. Running Bear felt something crack inside his chest, not breaking, but opening like ice yielding to spring warmth. For months he had carried not just grief but guilt, wondering if he could have somehow prevented Morning Star's death, if his love had been strong enough to anchor her spirit in the physical world. Hearing that she continued to think of him, to worry about his well-being even from beyond death, eased a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. "Why did she send you specifically?" he asked. Gentle Rain resumed her weaving, the shuttle moving smoothly between the threads. "Because I too have lost what I loved most in this world. Because I understand the temptation to follow grief into the darkness rather than stay in the light for those who need us. And because sometimes healing requires accepting help from unexpected sources." Throughout the day, Running Bear watched Gentle Rain care for his children with a natural grace that went beyond mere competence. She seemed to anticipate their needs before they expressed them, offering comfort precisely when it was required. The babies responded to her touch as if she were family, their small hands grasping her fingers with the trust they had never shown toward anyone but him. By evening, as he prepared to ask her to stay another night, Running Bear realized that somewhere between sunrise and sunset, he had stopped questioning whether to trust her and started wondering how he had managed 3 months without her help. Days settled into patterns that felt both new and ancient, as if the rhythm of life with Gentle Rain had always existed beneath the chaos of the past 3 moons. She rose before dawn to tend the fire and prepare the morning meal, moving through the lodge with a quiet efficiency that never woke the sleeping babies. Running Bear found himself watching her hands as she worked, hands that seemed to know exactly where Morningstar had kept every pot, every tool, every precious ingredient. The sacred cooking stones became a source of particular wonder and unease. These ancient stones had been passed down through Morningstar's family for generations, each one carved with symbols that told the story of healing and nourishment. Morningstar's grandmother had taught her the precise way to heat them, which combinations created the most nutritious broths for new mothers and growing children. It was knowledge that died with Morningstar, or so Running Bear had believed. Yet Gentle Rain used the stones with identical expertise, selecting the right one for each purpose, heating them to exactly the correct temperature, creating broths that made the babies thrive in ways Running Bear's clumsy attempts never could. When he asked how she knew these ancient techniques, she simply said that some knowledge lived in the stones themselves, waiting for hands that understood how to listen. Under her care, the babies began to show the robust health that had eluded them during their first 3 moons of life. Bright Moon's cheeks filled out, losing the pinched look that had worried Running Bear. Strong Wolf's limbs grew sturdy, and he began to hold his head up with the confidence of a child who felt secure in his world. The twins, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, developed the bright alertness that spoke of minds ready to absorb everything their expanding world offered. Running Bear's own body began to recover from the grinding exhaustion that had become his constant companion. Full nights of sleep allowed his muscles to relax, his mind to clear. For the first time since the children's birth, he could think beyond the immediate needs of survival to consider what kind of life he wanted to build for his family. But it was the small moments that unsettled him most, the unconscious gestures that were so purely Morningstar that they made his breath catch. The way Gentle Rain tucked a strand of hair behind her ear while concentrating. The soft clicking sound she made with her tongue when soothing a fussy baby. The exact tilt of her head when listening to something beyond the lodge that others might miss. One afternoon, as summer's heat grew heavy and the babies dozed in the shade, Running Bear found Gentle Rain grinding corn with the same circular motion Morningstar had used, her wrist moving in the precise rhythm that produced the finest meal. The sight was so familiar, so achingly right, that for a moment his heart forgot she was gone. "You move like her," he said softly. Gentle Rain paused in her work, studying his face with eyes that seemed to see more than most. The movements come from the same source, love for children who need care. Knowledge passed from mother to daughter across generations of women who understood that feeding a family is a sacred act. "But you're not Apache." "No," she agreed. "But the spirits that guide mothers are not bound by tribal lines. Love teaches the same lessons in every nation." The tribal members had begun to notice the changes in Running Bear's household. White Dove mentioned during a chance encounter that his children looked healthier than they had since birth. Gray Cloud's widow observed that Running Bear himself seemed less gaunt, less haunted by shadows that had nothing to do with the position of the sun. But with these improvements came questions that Running Bear was not yet ready to answer. Where had Gentle Rain come from? How long would she stay? What claims, if any, did she have on his family's future? The questions hung unspoken between them, acknowledged in glances and careful silences but never directly addressed. Evening brought its own rituals. After the babies settled for the night, Running Bear and Gentle Rain would sit by the fire, speaking of small things, the day's weather, the progress of various plants in Morningstar's garden, stories of the children's emerging personalities. They avoided topics that might require her to reveal more about her past than she seemed willing to share, and he avoided examining too closely why her presence had become essential to his peace of mind. Yet sometimes, in the space between words, Running Bear thought he glimpsed something in Gentle Rain's expression that reminded him that beneath her calm exterior lay her own mysteries, her own unhealed wounds that she carried with the same careful dignity he brought to his grief. The morning brought visitors that Running Bear had been expecting but dreading. Chief Standing Bear arrived with 2 tribal elders, their faces bearing the serious expressions of men conducting official business. They carried the war chief's ceremonial pipe, its carved bowl gleaming with the polish of countless important discussions. When tribal leaders brought the ceremonial pipe to someone's lodge, it meant the matter at hand would be decided according to ancient law and custom. Running Bear greeted them with the respect due their positions, offering water and dried meat. While internally preparing for questions he wasn't sure how to answer, the babies, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, remained unusually quiet in their cradle board. Gentle Rain continued her work at the loom, but he noticed the careful attention she paid to every word spoken. Running Bear, Chief Standing Bear began after the proper courtesies had been observed. The people speak of changes in your lodge. They say a woman has come to help with your children, but none know her family or her tribe. The elder called Gray Wolf leaned forward, his weathered hand steady on his walking stick. In times past, when strangers appeared among us, we required answers to certain questions. What village claims her? Who speaks for her character? What promises has she made about the length of her stay? Running Bear felt the weight of tradition pressing against his personal gratitude for Gentle Rain's help. Apache law had developed over generations to protect the tribe from those who might bring harm through deception or hidden purposes. He understood the wisdom of their caution, even as it threatened to take away the first peace his family had known. Her name is Gentle Rain, he began carefully. She came when the spring winds brought word of my children's need. Since her arrival, they have thrived as they never did before. The third elder, Wise Owl, studied Gentle Rain with eyes that had evaluated countless people seeking acceptance into their community. Child, he addressed her directly, what family raised you? What customs shaped your youth? These things we must know before the tribe can offer its protection. Gentle Rain set down her weaving and faced the elders with calm dignity. Honored fathers, I was raised among the mountain people, where the old ways are kept with great care. My family taught me to honor the spirits, to serve those in need, and to trust that the Great Spirit's guidance comes in many forms. The mountain people, Gray Wolf mused. Which band? Under what chief? My people lived apart from the larger bands, following paths shown in visions rather than established territories. We were few in number, dedicated to preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost. Running Bear noticed how skillfully Gentle Rain answered without providing the specific details the elders sought. Her responses contained truth but avoided the kind of concrete information that would allow verification. It was the technique of someone who had learned to navigate difficult questions without outright deception. Chief Standing Bear filled the ceremonial pipe with tobacco blessed by the tribal medicine man. Among our people, we have learned that those who cannot speak clearly of their past sometimes carry secrets that bring danger to others. We do not accuse, but we must understand. The pipe passed from hand to hand, each man taking the ritual puffs that would ensure their words carried spiritual weight. When it reached Running Bear, he felt the responsibility of speaking not just for himself but for his children's future. Honored fathers, in the 3 moons since my children's birth, I watched them grow weak despite my efforts to care for them. I saw my own strength failing under burdens too great for one person to carry. Since Gentle Rain's arrival, my children sleep peacefully, eat well, and show the signs of healthy growth that every parent hopes to see. He paused, choosing his next words with care. I do not know all the details of her past, but I know the results of her presence. My children live because of her care. If there is danger in accepting help that comes through mysterious paths, I believe there is greater danger in refusing help that brings life to those who need it. Wise Owl nodded slowly. You speak as a father protecting his young. This is honorable. But the tribe must think beyond one family's immediate needs to the safety of all. Gentle Rain rose gracefully, moving to where the babies lay in their cradle board. At her approach, all 4 children turned toward her with bright attention, their small faces reflecting contentment that had been absent during their first moons of life. If my presence brings concern to the people, I will not force my help where it is not wanted, she said quietly. But first, let the children themselves speak of what they have received. The weeks that followed the elder's visit brought a gradual softening in the boundaries Running Bear had maintained around his heart. Despite their official concerns, the tribal leaders had agreed to allow gentle rain to remain, influenced by the undeniable evidence of the children's improved health and Running Bear's own obvious recovery from the grinding exhaustion that had consumed him. What surprised Running Bear most was how naturally he began to imagine a future that included gentle rain as more than temporary help. She had become woven into the fabric of their daily life so seamlessly that her absence would leave tears he wasn't sure could be mended. When Bright Moon smiled for the first time, it was Gentle Rain's face she was looking at. When Strong Wolf began to make the cooing sounds that preceded actual words, it was in response to Gentle Rain's gentle conversations with him. The twins, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, had developed distinct personalities under her care. Swift Arrow showed early signs of the restless energy his name suggested, always moving his tiny limbs as if preparing for some great adventure. Singing Wind proved calmer but more observant, his dark eyes tracking movement with an intensity that suggested he was cataloging everything for future reference. One evening, as summer deepened toward its peak, Running Bear discovered Gentle Rain working on something that made his breath catch. In her lap lay a pair of beaded moccasins, their pattern half completed in the intricate style that had been Morningstar's specialty. The design was identical to one Morningstar had been crafting during her final weeks, intended as a gift for Running Bear to celebrate their children's safe arrival. "Where did you learn that pattern?" he asked, settling beside her at the fire. Gentle Rain's needle paused in its motion. "She shows me things in the quiet hours before dawn. Sometimes I see her hands guiding mine, finishing work that death interrupted." The moccasins were beautiful beyond anything Running Bear had seen since Morningstar's death. Each bead was placed with the precision of someone who understood not just the technical requirements of the craft but the spiritual significance of the symbols being created. The pattern told a story of protection and long life, of feet that would walk safely on difficult paths. "They were to be yours," Gentle Rain continued softly. "A father's moccasins, to carry you safely through all the years of watching your children grow. She wanted you to have them, wanted to finish what she started." Running Bear took the moccasins with hands that trembled slightly. The leather was soft but strong, worked with the plant oils that would keep it supple through years of wear. The beadwork showed the same tiny, even stitches that had made Morningstar's creations treasured throughout the tribe. Holding them, he could almost feel his wife's presence, as if her love had somehow been sewn into every careful stitch. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "Love doesn't end with the last breath," Gentle Rain replied, her own voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes it finds new hands to complete what the heart intended." That night, as they sat by the dying fire with the children peaceful in their cradle board, Running Bear found himself speaking of things he had shared with no one since Morningstar's death. He told Gentle Rain about the morning he first saw his wife gathering berries by the stream, how her laughter had made him forget the words he had planned to say. He described their wedding ceremony, when Morningstar had worn flowers in her hair and promised to walk beside him through all the seasons of their lives. "She would have been a wonderful mother," he said, watching the flames dance between them. "She is a wonderful mother," Gentle Rain corrected gently. "Death cannot change what lives in the heart. Your children carry her love, her hopes, her dreams for their futures. In that way, she mothers them still." As the stars wheeled overhead, Running Bear found himself studying Gentle Rain's profile in the firelight. Somewhere during the weeks of shared responsibility and quiet conversations, his feelings had shifted from gratitude to something deeper and more complex. He was drawn to her gentle strength, her intuitive understanding of his children's needs, the way she moved through his lodge as if she belonged there. But beneath his growing affection lay guilt that felt like betrayal. How could he develop feelings for another woman when Morningstar's absence still ached like a physical wound? How could he even consider opening his heart when doing so felt like abandoning the love that had defined him? "Gentle Rain," he said finally, "I need you to know that your presence here, it means more than just help with the children." She turned to meet his gaze, her eyes reflecting starlight and understanding. "And you need to know that some gifts come without conditions, without expectations of return. I am here because you need help, and because helping you helps me heal my own wounds." As the summer moon waned toward autumn, Strange occurrences began to cluster around Gentle Rain's presence like morning mist gathering in the valleys. Running Bear first noticed it in small things. The way birds seemed drawn to perch near wherever she worked, how the babies slept most peacefully when storms threatened, the odd habit Flames had of burning more steadily when she sat beside the fire. But it was the silver hair ornament that truly unsettled him. He discovered it one morning as Gentle Rain braided her hair. A delicate piece worked in a pattern he recognized with a jolt of shock. It was identical to the ornament Morningstar's mother had given her on their wedding day, a family heirloom that had been buried with his wife according to Apache custom. Yet here was its twin, gleaming in Gentle Rain's dark hair as if it had always belonged there. "That ornament," he said carefully. "Where did you acquire it?" Gentle Rain's hands stilled in their braiding. "It was my grandmother's. She said it came to her in a vision, along with instructions to keep it safe for the daughter who would need its protection most." "May I see it?" She removed the ornament with reverence, placing it in his palm. The silver was old, worked in the ancient style with symbols that carried deep spiritual meaning. But what made Running Bear's hands tremble was not just the similarity to Morningstar's ornament. It was the exact match, down to a tiny imperfection in one of the silver leaves that he had noticed countless times while watching his wife prepare for ceremonies. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Many things seem impossible until they become necessary," Gentle Rain replied softly. "Sometimes the spirits provide what the living need, even when it defies understanding." That night, Running Bear's dreams carried him into realms he had never experienced while waking. He found himself standing in a place that was neither fully the world of the living nor the land of the dead, a space between where spirits could speak directly to those they had left behind. Morningstar waited for him there, as beautiful as she had been in life, but somehow more luminous, as if death had refined her essence to its purest form. "My beloved," she said, her voice carrying the warmth he remembered but with new depths of wisdom. "You have been carrying burdens that were never meant for one person alone." "I promise to protect our children," he replied. "I promise to keep them safe and help them grow strong." "And you have. But protection doesn't mean isolation, and strength sometimes comes from accepting help rather than refusing it." Morningstar moved closer, and Running Bear felt the familiar comfort of her presence. "The woman who tends our children, she is exactly what I prayed the Great Spirit would send. But how can I love another when loving you defined who I am?" Morningstar's smile held infinite tenderness. "Love is not a fire that burns only once, my husband. It is a spring that can nourish many gardens without ever running dry. The love you gave me remains whole and perfect, unchanged by whatever love you might discover for another." When Running Bear woke, dawn was painting the sky with colors that reminded him of Morningstar's favorite shawl. Gentle Rain was already awake, tending the fire with movements that had become as familiar as his own breathing. But now he noticed things he had missed before. The way she paused sometimes, as if listening to voices only she could hear. The odd moments when she spoke to the babies in words that seemed meant for someone else entirely. "You dream of her often," Gentle Rain observed without looking up from her work. "Last night felt different, more real than dreaming. The veil between worlds grows thin in places where great love has been." She turned to face him, and Running Bear saw something in her expression that confirmed his growing suspicions. Sometimes those who have crossed over find ways to continue caring for those they left behind. Other tribal members had begun to report their own strange experiences. White have mentioned seeing a woman in traditional dress walking near the burial grounds, always disappearing when approached directly. The medicine man spoke of dreams filled with messages from ancestors who seemed unusually active in the affairs of the living. Gray Cloud's widow claimed she had seen Morningstar herself, standing at the edge of the village during the full moon, watching Running Bear's lodge with an expression of deep satisfaction. When she tried to approach, the figure faded like smoke, leaving only the scent of sage and sweetgrass. "The spirits are restless," Wise Owl confided to Running Bear during a chance meeting at the stream. "But not in a way that brings danger. They seem satisfied, as if some great work approaches completion." That evening, as Gentle Rain settled the children for the night, Running Bear watched her sing the same lullaby Morningstar had hummed while pregnant, her voice carrying melodies she claimed to have learned in dreams. The babies responded as if the songs were already familiar, their eyes growing heavy with the contentment of children who felt completely secure in their world. The tribal medicine man, Walking Thunder, came to Running Bear's lodge as the autumn leaves began their transformation from green to gold. His weathered face bore the serious expression of someone who had wrestled with spiritual mysteries and emerged changed by the experience. In his gnarled hands, he carried his sacred rattle, an ancient instrument carved from a gourd and decorated with symbols that predated memory. "The spirits have been speaking in my dreams," Walking Thunder announced without preamble. "They speak of a woman whose presence bridges two worlds, and of children who carry blessings that extend beyond one family to touch an entire people." Running Bear invited the medicine man to sit by his fire, offering the traditional hospitality while internally preparing for revelations he sensed might change everything he thought he understood about his situation. Gentle Rain continued her work at the loom, but her attention focused entirely on Walking Thunder's words. "I have brought my sacred rattle," the medicine man continued, "because the spirits have instructed me to conduct a ceremony that will reveal the true nature of what has come among us. If the woman is what she appears, a helper sent by benevolent forces, the rattle will sing with joy. If she carries deception or danger, it will warn us." The sacred rattle had been in Walking Thunder's family for 7 generations, passed from medicine man to medicine man along with the knowledge of how to read its spiritual responses. Apache tradition held that it could detect the presence of spirits, distinguish between beneficial and harmful supernatural influences, and reveal hidden truths that ordinary senses could not perceive. "I welcome such a ceremony," Gentle Rain said calmly, setting aside her weaving. "Truth serves everyone better than uncertainty." As the sun reached its peak, tribal members gathered outside Running Bear's lodge to witness the spiritual testing. Chief Standing Bear attended, along with the elders who had previously questioned Gentle Rain's background. Word had spread that the medicine man would perform a ceremony to determine whether the mysterious woman brought blessing or curse to their people. Walking Thunder began with purification rituals, burning sage and sweetgrass to cleanse the space of any influences that might interfere with clear spiritual communication. He painted his face with the sacred symbols that marked him as an intermediary between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. The rattle remained silent in his hands, waiting for the moment when spiritual forces would move through it. "Spirits of our ancestors," Walking Thunder intoned, his voice carrying the authority of generations of medicine men. "We seek understanding of the woman who has come among us. Show us her true nature, that we might know whether to welcome or warn against her presence." He began to shake the rattle in the traditional rhythm, slow at first, then building to the pace that would open pathways between worlds. The sound filled the air with vibrations that seemed to touch something deeper than hearing, resonating in the chest and bones of everyone present. At first, the rattle produced only its normal sound, the whisper of seeds and small stones moving within the carved gourd. But as Walking Thunder directed his attention toward Gentle Rain, the instrument began to change. The normal rattle gave way to something musical, as if the seeds within had become tiny bells ringing in harmony. The gathered tribal members murmured in amazement as the sound grew more beautiful, more complex. It was not the warning cry that would indicate spiritual danger, nor even the neutral response that would suggest an ordinary person. Instead, the rattle sang with the joy traditionally associated with the presence of beloved ancestors returning to bless their descendants. "Spirits of the sacred directions," Walking Thunder continued, his own voice filled with awe. "Speak through your servant. Tell us what you would have us know." The rattle's song intensified, and several witnesses later swore they heard voices within the music. Women's voices speaking words of blessing and protection. White Dove claimed she recognized her own mother's voice among them. Gray Cloud's widow insisted she heard her grandmother singing a lullaby from her childhood. But it was Running Bear who heard most clearly, because within the chorus of ancestral voices, Morning Star's voice rose like sunlight breaking through clouds. She spoke no words he could later repeat, but her meaning filled his heart with certainty. Gentle Rain carried blessings that extended far beyond one family's need for help. When Walking Thunder finally allowed the rattle to fall silent, the gathered people remained motionless for several heartbeats, processing what they had witnessed. The medicine man studied Gentle Rain with new understanding, his expression mixing respect with wonder. "The spirits have spoken clearly," he announced to the assembly. "This woman walks between worlds as a bridge for those who have crossed over to continue caring for those they left behind. She carries no danger to our people, only the love of ancestors who refuse to let their descendants face hardship alone." The ceremony's aftermath brought a new openness between Running Bear and Gentle Rain, as if the official recognition of her spiritual nature had freed them both to speak more honestly about the mysterious circumstances that had brought them together. That evening, as the children slept peacefully in their cradle board, Gentle Rain began to share the story she had kept hidden since her arrival. "I was not always as you see me now," she began, her voice carrying the weight of painful memories. "2 winters passed. I lived in a village high in the mountains, where my husband and I tended our own children and believed ourselves blessed by the Great Spirit's protection." She paused to arrange the fire, her movements betraying an emotion she struggled to contain. "The sickness came with the first snows, a fever that spread through our village like wildfire through dry grass. My husband, my 2 little ones, most of our people, all crossed over within the span of 3 moons. Running Bear felt his heart contract with recognition of grief that mirrored his own. "You lost everything." "I lost everyone I thought gave my life meaning," she corrected gently. "For many moons after, I wandered the mountains, seeking death to reunite me with those I loved. But the spirits would not allow it. Instead, they began sending visions, images of 4 babies crying without comfort, of a man whose grief threatened to consume not just himself but the children who needed him." From a small bundle beside her sleeping furs, Gentle Rain withdrew something that made Running Bear's breath catch. It was a wooden doll, carved with exquisite detail and painted in the traditional style that mothers used to comfort their daughters during illness or fear. But this was no ordinary doll. It bore the exact likeness of Morning Star's face, crafted with loving precision down to the small scar on her chin from a childhood accident. "Morning Star made this?" Running Bear whispered, reaching for the doll with trembling hands. "She was working on it during her final weeks, hiding it from me because she wanted it to be a surprise for our daughter. She showed me where to find it," Gentle Rain said softly. "In the vision, she led me to a place beneath the great oak behind your lodge, where she had buried it wrapped in soft deer hide to keep it safe until Bright Moon grew old enough to treasure it properly." Running Bear cradled the doll as if it were alive, remembering the secretive smile Morning Star had worn whenever he found her working on mysterious projects during the long evenings of her pregnancy. She had been preparing gifts for children she would never live to see grow up, pouring her love into objects that would carry her presence forward into their futures. "The visions became more detailed as my own healing progressed," Gentle Rain continued. "I saw your lodge, your children's faces, the exact patterns of the blankets Morning Star was weaving for them. I saw you growing thinner, more desperate, refusing help because accepting it felt like abandoning hope that she might return." "Why were you chosen specifically?" Running Bear asked, though he suspected he already knew part of the answer. "Because grief had taught me to listen for voices that others cannot hear. Because losing everything I loved had opened spaces in my spirit where the wisdom of those who have crossed over could take root and grow." Gentle Rain's eyes reflected firelight and understanding that came from walking through the darkest valleys of human experience. And because sometimes healing requires 2 wounded souls to help each other remember that love continues even when its original form changes. The wooden doll seemed to grow warm in Running Bear's hands, as if Morning Star's love had been somehow preserved within the carved wood. He could imagine his wife working on it by lamplight, planning the moment when she would present it to their daughter with stories of brave women who had faced challenges with wisdom and courage. "There is more," Gentle Rain said, her voice barely above a whisper. "In my visions, Morning Star spoke of a choice that would come. A choice between clinging to what was lost and embracing what might be gained. She said that true love desires the beloved's happiness above all else, even when that happiness takes unexpected forms." Running Bear set the doll carefully beside the fire, where its painted features seemed to dance in the flickering light. "She told me something similar in my dreams, that love is not a fire that burns only once, but a spring that can nourish many gardens. The spirits brought us together not to replace what we lost, but to show us that love builds on love, that healing comes through helping others heal. Gentle Rain reached across the space between them to touch his hand briefly. What we create together will honor both what was and what might be. As the fire settled into glowing coals, Running Bear felt something shift inside his chest. Not the breaking open of old wounds, but the gentle expansion of a heart learning to hold both grief and hope simultaneously. The turning of the seasons brought more than changing leaves and cooler nights. It brought the blossoming of love that had been growing quietly beneath the careful tending of shared responsibilities and mutual understanding. Running Bear found himself watching Gentle Rain with new eyes, seeing not just the capable helper who had saved his children's lives, but the woman whose presence had restored joy to his daily existence. Their first expression of love came not through grand declarations but through the small intimacies that develop between two people learning to trust each other completely. The way Gentle Rain's hand lingered when passing him the water gourd. The protective tenderness in Running Bear's voice when speaking her name to others. The comfortable silences that needed no words to convey deep contentment. One evening, as the first frost warned of winter's approach, Gentle Rain surprised Running Bear by showing him a project she had been working on in secret. From her bundle of personal belongings, she withdrew a wedding blanket in the traditional style, its pattern half completed in the intricate designs that told the story of two lives joining to become one. "Morning Star began this," she said, spreading the blanket carefully beside the fire. "She showed me in my visions how she intended to complete it. Should the Great Spirit bless your union with the children she carried." Running Bear traced the emerging patterns with reverent fingers. The design was unmistakably Morning Star's work. He recognized her precise stitches, her preference for certain color combinations, the way she incorporated symbols that held special meaning for their relationship. But woven seamlessly among her original work were newer sections that could only have come from Gentle Rain's hands. "She intended this as a gift for our future together," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And she wishes it to serve that purpose still, though the future has taken a different shape than any of us expected." Gentle Rain knelt beside him, her own fingers tracing the pattern where her work joined Morning Star's. "She shows me how to complete what she started, so that when you are ready to embrace a new beginning, you will have her blessing woven into the very fabric of your new life." The intimacy of working together on the wedding blanket created opportunities for conversations they had not yet dared to have. As their fingers moved in synchronized rhythm, sorting threads and creating the intricate patterns that would mark their union, they spoke of hopes that extended beyond mere survival. "I dream sometimes of watching our children grow," Running Bear admitted. "All four of them, raised with the knowledge that they are loved by their birth mother's spirit and their earth mother's hands. They will grow knowing that love can take many forms, that families can be created through choice as well as blood." Gentle Rain selected a thread the color of autumn leaves. "Bright Moon will learn that women can be strong without being harsh, that wisdom comes from listening to voices others cannot hear. Strong Wolf will understand that true strength includes gentleness, that protecting others sometimes means accepting help. And the twins. Swift Arrow will learn patience to balance his eagerness for adventure. Singing Wind will discover that the stories worth telling are often those that bring healing rather than just entertainment." The conversations often stretched late into the night, punctuated by the comfortable work of their hands and the peaceful breathing of sleeping children. Running Bear found himself sharing dreams he had not spoken aloud since Morning Star's death. Hopes for his children's futures, plans for improvements to the lodge, even tentative ideas about expanding their small family through additional children. "Would you want more children?" he asked one night, the question emerging from a conversation about adding sleeping spaces to the lodge. Gentle Rain paused in her stitching, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I would want children who came from love rather than loneliness, who were welcomed into a family already complete but open to growth. I would want to give them siblings who show them daily what it means to be cherished." The physical attraction that had been building between them found expression in increasingly tender moments. Hands that touched while working together, embraces that lasted longer than comfort required, kisses that began as gratitude and deepened into something more profound. When Running Bear finally spoke the words that had been growing in his heart, they came not as a dramatic declaration but as a simple truth acknowledged. I love you, gentle rain, not as a replacement for what I lost, but as a gift I never expected to receive. And I love you, she replied, her voice steady with certainty. Not because grief made me desperate for any connection, but because healing taught me to recognize the difference between love born of need and love born of choice. Their first night as acknowledged lovers was gentle, reverent, filled with the tenderness of two people who had learned to value the precious nature of love, given freely. Winter's approach brought with it a spiritual intensity that seemed to thicken the air around Running Bear's lodge like mountain mist. The veil between worlds, already thin due to the presence of gentle rain and the continued influence of Morning Star's spirit, grew gossamer fine as the season of deep contemplation settled over the land. It was during the longest night of winter that the most profound spiritual revelation occurred. Running Bear woke from sleep to find his lodge filled with a soft, silvery light that had no earthly source. Gentle Rain sat beside the fire, but she was not alone. Morning Star knelt across from her, as solid and present as she had been in life, her face glowing with the serene beauty of one who had found peace in the spirit world. The sacred prayer bundle that had belonged to Morning Star's grandmother lay open between the two women, its contents arranged in patterns that spoke of communication with the ancestors. The bundle contained items passed down through generations of holy women, crystals that caught and held spiritual energy, sage blessed by medicine men long dead, small bones that could reveal the movement of spirits between worlds. As Running Bear watched in awestruck silence, the items in the prayer bundle began to glow with the same soft light that filled the lodge. Each piece resonated with spiritual energy, creating a web of connection that allowed the living and the dead to speak directly to each other. My beloved husband, Morning Star said, her voice carrying the warmth he remembered, but now layered with wisdom that could only come from experiencing the mysteries beyond death. The time has come for you to understand the full truth of what the spirits have arranged. Running Bear found his voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. I see you, my heart. I hear you. Gentle Rain is more than the helper I sent to care for our children. Morning Star continued. She is the answer to prayers I spoke as my spirit prepared to leave this world. Prayers that you would not remain alone, that our children would know a mother's love, that healing would come to replace the grief that threatened to consume you. Gentle Rain spoke then, her voice blending harmoniously with Morning Star's, as if they were two parts of the same song. We are connected across the boundary between worlds, she and I. Her love flows through me to reach you and the children. My hands become her hands when they need a mother's touch. My voice carries her lullabies when they need comfort in the night. The prayer bundle pulsed brighter, and Running Bear saw with spiritual sight the golden threads of connection that linked the three of them in a bond that transcended the limitations of physical existence. Morning Star's love for her family had been so strong that death could not sever it. Instead, it had found a new vessel through which to continue nurturing those she had been forced to leave behind. But you are not merely a vessel, Morning Star said to Gentle Rain with infinite tenderness. You are a woman worthy of love in your own right, one whose own journey through loss has prepared you to appreciate the gifts that life still offers. What grows between you and my husband is real, separate from but enhanced by the spiritual connection we share. The babies, who had slept peacefully through the beginning of the supernatural encounter, began to stir as if sensing the presence of their birth mother's spirit. One by one, they opened their eyes and gazed toward Morning Star with the unwavering attention that babies reserve for faces that bring them comfort. My little ones, Morning Star breathed, reaching toward them with hands that seemed to be made of starlight. You are more blessed than most children, for you will grow knowing that death cannot diminish love, that the spirits of those who cherish you remain near to guide and protect you throughout your lives. Bright Moon made soft cooing sounds, her tiny hand reaching toward her birth mother's glowing form. Strong Wolf's serious expression softened into the kind of smile he usually reserved for Gentle Rain. The twins, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, moved in their cradle board as if trying to get closer to the source of the gentle light that filled their world. They will carry special gifts, Morning Star told Running Bear. Bright moon will see beyond the surface of things to the spiritual truths that guide the wise. Strong wolf will possess the strength to protect others while remaining gentle of heart. Swift arrow will travel far but always find his way home to the love that anchors him. Singing wind will speak words that heal the wounded spirits of his people. As dawn approached, the spiritual intensity began to fade, but not before Morning Star delivered one final message that would reshape Running Bear's understanding of his future. The choice that approaches is not whether to remain connected to me or to embrace love with gentle rain, she said. The choice is whether to accept the great gift the spirits offer, a love that transcends the boundaries between worlds, a family bound by spiritual as well as earthly ties, a future built on the foundation of what was but not limited by what has been lost. The spiritual revelation brought unexpected complexity to what Running Bear had begun to think of as his straightforward path toward a new life with gentle rain. 3 days after Morning Star's appearance, Gentle Rain approached him with news that struck like lightning on a clear day. The spirits have spoken to me of a choice that must be made, she said, her voice carrying a gravity that made Running Bear's heart clench with foreboding. My presence here, the connection I share with Morning Star's spirit, it exists because the boundary between worlds has been stretched thin to accommodate love that refused to be severed by death. They sat beside the fire as the winter wind howled around the lodge, while the children slept peacefully in their cradle board, unaware that their future hung in the balance of spiritual forces beyond mortal comprehension. What choice? Running Bear asked, though he feared he already knew. I can remain in this world, becoming fully part of your family, taking my place as wife and mother in the way of living women. But doing so would sever the spiritual connection that allows Morning Star's love to flow through me to reach you and the children. She would be forced to move fully into the spirit world, unable to continue guiding and protecting your family. Gentle Rain reached into her medicine pouch and withdrew something that made Running Bear's breath catch. The sacred choosing stones, carved from rare minerals found only in the highest mountain peaks, glowed with an inner light that indicated their spiritual activation. These stones had been used by the Apache for generations to make decisions that would shape entire bloodlines. Their magic triggered only when choices of ultimate importance required divine guidance. Or, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I can choose to exist permanently as a bridge between worlds, neither fully living nor fully dead, but something new that allows the love between all of us to continue flowing freely. In that form, I could remain with you and the children, but our relationship would be spiritual rather than physical. We could not have children together, could not grow old in the way of ordinary couples. The choosing stones pulsed brighter as she spoke, their light shifting from white to gold to silver, indicating the magnitude of the spiritual forces involved in the decision ahead. There is a third possibility, Gentle Rain said after a long moment of contemplation. I could choose to return fully to the spirit world, leaving you free to find love with a living woman, while Morning Star's spirit gradually withdraws to allow your family to heal in more conventional ways. Running Bear stared at the glowing stones, understanding that each choice carried both gifts and sacrifices that would ripple through generations. The decision would affect not just himself and Gentle Rain, but the 4 children who had come to know her as their mother, and even Morning Star's spirit, which had found peace through the knowledge that her family was being cared for. How long do we have to decide? Until the spring winds return, Gentle Rain replied. The same winds that brought me to you will require an answer when they blow again across the sacred mountains. That night, Running Bear sought counsel from Chief Standing Bear and the tribal elders, explaining the supernatural circumstances that had led to this unprecedented choice. The men listened with the gravity such matters deserved, understanding that the decision would set spiritual precedents that might guide their people for generations to come. In the old stories, Wise Owl observed, such choices usually come to those the spirits trust to decide with wisdom rather than mere desire. What does your heart tell you, Running Bear? My heart is torn in 3 directions, Running Bear admitted. Part of me wants to keep things as they are, with Morning Star's spirit close and Gentle Rain caring for our children. Part of me wants the normal life of a man with a living wife and the possibility of more children. And part of me fears that any choice I make will cause pain to someone I love. Walking Thunder, the medicine man, studied the sacred choosing stones with experienced eyes. These stones glow brightest when the decision involves love rather than fear, sacrifice rather than selfishness. Whatever choice you make, it must be guided by what serves the greatest good, not just your own desires. The tribal elders agreed to perform a ceremony that would help Running Bear and Gentle Rain understand the spiritual consequences of each choice before they made their final decision. But first, they insisted, the couple must spend time in deep contemplation, seeking guidance from their own hearts and the spirits that had brought them together. Some choices, Chief Standing Bear concluded, cannot be made by reason alone. They require wisdom that comes from a place deeper than thought, a place where love and spiritual truth meet to create understanding that transcends ordinary decision-making. As Running Bear returned to his lodge, he found Gentle Rain teaching the children a hand game that Morning Star had shown her in visions, her laughter mixing with their delighted giggles in a sound that embodied everything he feared to lose. The weight of the approaching decision brought unexpected support from the tribal community, as if the supernatural circumstances surrounding Running Bear's family had awakened something protective in the collective spirit of the people. What began as individual gestures of concern gradually evolved into a formal recognition of the spiritual significance of the choice that lay ahead. Chief Standing Bear convened the tribal council to address the situation officially. In a ceremony rarely performed except during times of great spiritual importance, the elders brought forth the unity circle of carved stones, 21 sacred stones, each representing one of the traditional Apache clans, arranged in patterns that had guided tribal decisions for countless generations. Running Bear's family stands at the center of forces that touch all our people, the chief announced to the assembled tribe. The spirits have chosen to work through them in ways that will be remembered in our stories for generations to come. It is fitting that the entire tribe offer support during this time of sacred choosing. White Dove stepped forward, carrying a beautifully worked basket filled with items contributed by various tribal members. For the children, she said, so they will know they are cherished by all their people, whatever choice their parents make. Gray Cloud's widow added her contribution, warm clothing sized for growing bodies, sewn with protective symbols and blessed by the medicine man. So they will be clothed in their people's love, she explained. Even the youngest members of the tribe had prepared gifts. Prairie Flower, now a young woman with children of her own, brought carefully preserved foods that would sustain the family through whatever spiritual trials lay ahead. The teenage boys contributed wood for the fire, understanding that spiritual contemplation required physical comfort to support deep thinking. The Unity Circle ceremony created a protective spiritual boundary around Running Bear's family, ensuring that their decision would be made free from negative influences that might seek to exploit such a momentous spiritual opening. Each carved stone was blessed individually, then placed according to ancient patterns that would channel beneficial spiritual energy toward those who needed guidance. We do not seek to influence your choice, Walking Thunder explained as he completed the circle, but we ensure that whatever decision emerges from your hearts will be pure, untainted by fear or outside manipulation. The formal tribal recognition transformed the personal crisis into something larger, a community event that would become part of Apache spiritual history. Children who witnessed the ceremony would grow up knowing they had been present when the spirits worked openly among their people. Adults would tell the story to their grandchildren, passing down not just the facts but the sense of wonder that came from seeing love transcend the boundaries between life and death. But the ceremony also brought pressure that Running Bear had not anticipated. With the entire tribe watching, the decision felt less like a personal choice and more like a spiritual test with consequences that would ripple through Apache understanding for generations to come. I never wanted our private struggle to become a tribal spectacle, he confided to Gentle Rain as they sat within the protective circle of stones. Perhaps that's why the spirits chose us, she replied thoughtfully. Because we sought nothing for ourselves beyond the chance to care for 4 children who needed love. The spirits trust those who don't seek power or recognition to handle power and recognition wisely. The days within the Unity Circle brought a deepening of spiritual awareness that affected everyone in the family. The children, despite their young age, seemed to sense that momentous events surrounded them. They slept more peacefully, ate with better appetite, and displayed an unusual calm that suggested they felt completely secure despite the supernatural energies swirling around their lodge. Bright Moon began to show signs of the spiritual gifts Morningstar had predicted. She would gaze intently at empty spaces as if seeing visitors invisible to others, and her tiny hands would reach toward things that weren't there in ways that made perfect sense to those who watched carefully. Strong Wolf demonstrated an empathy unusual in such a young child, somehow knowing when the adults around him needed comfort and offering it through gentle touches and the kind of steady gaze that seemed to say everything would be well. The twins, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, began to display a connection that went beyond normal sibling bonds. They would wake simultaneously, cry and laugh in harmony, and seem to communicate through means that required no words. "They're preparing themselves," Gentle Rain observed one evening, as she watched the 4 children interact with the spiritual energies that filled their home. "Whatever choice we make, they'll be ready for the gifts and responsibilities it brings." The tribal elders visited daily, not to pressure or advise, but to witness and record the spiritual phenomena that surrounded the family during this time of choosing. Their presence served as both protection and validation, ensuring that future generations would understand the magnitude of what occurred within the Unity Circle during those crucial days of contemplation. As the deadline for their decision approached with the first stirrings of spring wind in the high passes, Walking Thunder announced that the time had come for the final spiritual ceremony that would guide their choice. The medicine man had spent days in fasting and prayer, seeking visions that would help him understand what the spirits required of this unprecedented situation. "Tonight, when the moon reaches its full power, we will conduct the ceremony of the Bridge of Souls," he told Running Bear and Gentle Rain. "It is a ritual so ancient and sacred that it has been performed only 3 times in the memory of our people, and each time it marked a moment when the living and the dead worked together to change the course of tribal destiny." The Bridge of Souls necklace materialized that afternoon, appearing around Gentle Rain's neck without warning or explanation. None of the tribal members had seen her put it on, yet there it hung, a chain of silver and turquoise worked in patterns that predated Apache memory, its very existence confirming legends that most had considered mere stories told around winter fires. The necklace was said to appear only when the veil between worlds had grown so thin that spirits could manifest physical objects through pure will. Its presence marked Gentle Rain as a true bridge between the realms of the living and the dead, someone chosen by forces beyond mortal understanding to serve as a conduit for love that refused to be constrained by death. "I can feel them," Gentle Rain whispered as the necklace settled against her chest. "All the women who have worn this before me, grandmothers and medicine women and wives who loved so deeply that death could not sever their connections to those they left behind. They're here to witness our choice, to ensure that whatever decision we make serves the greatest good." As darkness fell, the entire tribe gathered in a circle around Running Bear's lodge, their faces painted with symbols that would protect them from the intense spiritual energies about to be unleashed. Children too young to understand the ceremony's significance nevertheless felt its importance, sitting quietly beside their parents with wide eyes and hushed voices. Walking Thunder began the ritual by calling upon the spirits of the 4 directions, each invocation accompanied by the scattering of sacred herbs that created colors in the flames unlike anything found in the natural world. The fire burned blue, then silver, then gold, each hue representing different aspects of the spiritual forces gathering to witness the ceremony. "Spirits of our ancestors," Walking Thunder intoned, his voice carrying across the silent gathering, "we call upon your wisdom to guide this choice that will shape not only one family but the understanding of your people for generations to come. Show us the path that serves love without destroying it, that honors the past while embracing the future." The Bridge of Souls necklace began to glow with its own light, and where its radiance touched Gentle Rain's skin, she became translucent, revealing the spiritual connections that linked her to forces beyond the physical world. Golden threads of energy became visible, connecting her to Morningstar's spirit, to Running Bear's heart, to each of the 4 children in patterns so complex and beautiful that several witnesses wept at the sight. Morningstar's spirit manifested with greater clarity than ever before, standing beside Gentle Rain with a presence so solid that she cast shadows in the firelight. But she was not alone. Other spirits gathered in the circle, Gentle Rain's deceased husband and children, ancestors from both bloodlines, even women who had worn the Bridge of Souls necklace in centuries past. "The time for choosing has come," Morning Star announced, her voice reaching every person in the gathering despite being no louder than a normal speaking tone. "But first, let all present understand what this choice truly means." The spiritual assembly began to reveal truths that transformed everyone's understanding of what had transpired. Gentle Rain's arrival had not been chance or even simple spiritual intervention. It had been the culmination of a plan set in motion by women who had died decades before either Running Bear or Morning Star was born. "Love that transcends death creates ripples across time," explained the spirit of an ancient medicine woman whose name had been lost to memory, but whose wisdom lived on. When Morning Star prayed as her life ebbed away for someone to care for her family, that prayer joined with prayers spoken by other loving women across the generations. Together, they created the spiritual force that called Gentle Rain to this place at this time. The ceremony reached its climactic moment when the Bridge of Souls necklace projected images into the fire that showed the consequences of each possible choice. The gathered tribe saw visions of futures that could unfold, some filled with joy and others with sacrifice, all of them shaped by forces of love that had learned to work through seemingly impossible circumstances. "Now," Walking Thunder announced, "the choice must be made, witnessed by spirits and mortals alike, sealed by forces that will ensure it cannot be undone by doubt or regret." The moment of choice arrived with the kind of profound stillness that precedes life-altering decisions. Running Bear and Gentle Rain stood together within the sacred circle, surrounded by spirits and tribal members whose collective breath seemed to pause as they awaited the answer that would reshape their understanding of love's power to transcend death itself. Gentle Rain spoke first, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who had wrestled with impossible options and found clarity in the deepest chambers of her heart. "I choose to remain as a bridge between worlds," she announced, and as the words left her lips, the Bridge of Souls necklace flared with brilliant light that transformed her appearance in ways that made the assembled witnesses gasp in wonder. Her physical form became more luminous while retaining its essential humanity. She remained recognizably herself, but now carried an otherworldly radiance that marked her as something new in the experience of the Apache people. She could still touch and be touched, still care for the children and share companionship with Running Bear, but she had also become a permanent conduit through which the love of those who had crossed over could continue, reaching those who remained behind. "And I choose to honor that sacrifice by building a life that serves the greater good rather than merely personal happiness," Running Bear added, his own voice steady with resolve that came from understanding the magnitude of what was being offered to their family. As their words sealed the decision, supernatural phenomena erupted throughout the gathering. The Eternal Flame Stone, an artifact of legend that had not been seen for generations, materialized in the center of the sacred fire. The stone began to burn with a light that required no fuel, its flame representing the eternal nature of love that refuses to be diminished by death or separation. Morning Star's spirit stepped forward to place her hands over those of Running Bear and Gentle Rain, creating a triangle of connection that bound the three of them in ways that would endure beyond the limitations of mortal existence. Where their hands touched, light poured forth in patterns that told the story of their unprecedented union. A marriage that included the living, the dead, and the one who had chosen to exist between worlds to preserve the connection between them. "You have chosen wisely," Morning Star said, her voice filled with joy and approval. "Your sacrifice ensures that our children will grow knowing that love finds ways to overcome any obstacle, that family can extend beyond the boundaries that usually separate different forms of existence." The ceremony's climax brought transformations that affected everyone present. The four babies, previously too young to participate consciously in the spiritual events surrounding them, suddenly displayed awareness that astonished their elders. Each child sat up in their cradle board with perfect balance, their dark eyes bright with intelligence that seemed to encompass understanding far beyond their few months of life. Bright Moon reached toward her birth mother's spirit, and her Earth mother's transformed form with equal recognition and joy. Strong Wolf made sounds that seemed to carry meaning, as if he were attempting to speak words of blessing. The twins, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, moved in perfect synchronization, their tiny hands grasping at the light that flowed between the three adults who had committed to raising them. The tribal witnesses experienced their own spiritual awakening as the ceremony reached its conclusion. Many reported later that they could see the golden threads of connection that linked every person in the gathering, understanding for the first time how individual choices rippled outward to affect entire communities across generations. Chief Standing Bear spoke for the tribe when he declared, "What we have witnessed here will become part of our sacred tradition, a story that will guide our people when they face their own seemingly impossible choices. You have shown us that love backed by spiritual wisdom can create solutions that transcend the limitations of ordinary existence." Walking Thunder carefully gathered the sacred ashes from the eternal flamestone, preserving them in a special pouch that would be kept with the tribe's most precious spiritual artifacts. "These ashes will carry the power of your choice," he explained. "When future generations face situations that seem to offer only loss or compromise, they can draw upon the spiritual energy you have created here tonight." As dawn approached, the supernatural intensity of the ceremony gradually subsided, but the changes it had wrought remained permanent. Gentle Rain retained her luminous quality, marking her as someone who existed partially in both worlds. Running Bear carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to embrace mystery rather than demanding complete understanding. The children showed signs of the special gifts that would shape their contributions to their people's future. The tribal gathering dispersed with the reverent silence of people who had witnessed the birth of new possibilities in the relationship between the living and the dead. They had seen love refuse to accept the limitations that death usually imposed, and they had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as impossible choices. The seasons that followed the great ceremony brought a new rhythm to life in the Apache village, one shaped by the understanding that the boundaries between the living and the dead had been permanently altered through the spiritual choices made by Running Bear's family. As the children grew from infants into curious toddlers, their special nature became increasingly apparent to everyone around them. The four-direction medallion appeared on their first birthday, splitting mysteriously into 4 identical pieces that attached themselves to each child's clothing with no visible means of fastening. The medallion had been a single artifact in tribal legend, said to provide protection and guidance to those chosen for special purposes. Its spontaneous division to protect all 4 children confirmed what the tribal elders had begun to suspect. These were not ordinary children, but souls chosen before birth to serve as bridges between their people and the spirit world. Bright Moon, now walking steadily on legs that carried her with unusual grace, displayed the ability to see spirits that others could not perceive. She would pause in her play to wave at empty air, then giggle as if someone invisible had waved back. When tribal members died, she would point toward the sky and say, "Flying away," before anyone had told her about the death, her certainty bringing comfort to grieving families who understood that she could see their loved ones making safe transitions to the spirit world. Strong Wolf showed signs of the protective strength Morning Star had predicted, but combined with a gentleness that made him beloved by everyone in the village. Despite being barely 2 years old, he somehow knew when other children were sad or frightened, offering wordless comfort through touches that seemed to carry healing power. Animals were drawn to him in ways that amazed the hunters, and even the most skittish deer would allow him to approach without fear. Swift Arrow lived up to his name with energy that kept his caretakers constantly alert, but his restlessness served a purpose beyond mere activity. He seemed to sense things before they happened. Storms that were still hours away, visitors approaching long before they came into sight, changes in the wind that would affect hunting or gathering expeditions. His constant movement became a form of early warning system that the tribe learned to respect and rely upon. Singing Wind proved to be the storyteller Morning Star had envisioned, though his gifts manifested earlier than anyone expected. Before he could speak in full sentences, he was humming melodies that no one had taught him, tunes that seemed to carry messages from the spirit world. As his vocabulary developed, he began repeating stories that the tribal elders recognized as ancient legends that had been forgotten for generations, as if the spirits were using his young voice to preserve wisdom that might otherwise be lost. Running Bear and Gentle Rain settled into their unique roles as parents in a family that existed partially in both worlds. Their relationship deepened into something that transcended the normal bonds between husband and wife, encompassing spiritual dimensions that enriched their connection while requiring new forms of understanding and patience. Gentle Rain's transformed nature allowed her to serve as a conduit for guidance from ancestors who had lived generations before, bringing wisdom to tribal decisions that might otherwise have been made with incomplete understanding. Chief Standing Bear began consulting her when difficult choices faced the people, trusting that the spirits speaking through her carried perspectives unavailable to purely mortal counselors. Running Bear discovered that his own spiritual awareness had been enhanced by his connection to Gentle Rain and Morning Star's continuing presence. He developed intuitive understanding of spiritual matters that made him invaluable to Walking Thunder as an assistant in ceremonies and healing rituals. His ability to see the connections between physical symptoms and spiritual imbalances made him sought after by families dealing with illnesses that resisted conventional treatment. The village itself began to change as word spread to other Apache bands about the family that lived partially in both worlds. Pilgrims arrived seeking spiritual guidance, healing, or simply the chance to witness proof that love could overcome death's apparent finality. The increased spiritual activity attracted beneficial attention from protective spirits, making the entire community safer and more prosperous than it had been in living memory. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the Apache people understood their relationship with death and the continuation of love beyond physical existence. Children grew up knowing that death was not an ending but a transformation, that the spirits of those who loved them remained available for guidance and comfort. This knowledge reduced the fear and grief that had traditionally accompanied loss, replacing them with an understanding that love created bonds too strong for death to sever. The tribal elders began recording the family's story in the traditional ways, ensuring that future generations would understand the spiritual precedents that had been established. They commissioned artists to create pictographs that would preserve the visual memory of the ceremonies, and designated storytellers to maintain the oral traditions that would carry. The lessons forward through time. 10 summers had passed since the spring winds first brought Gentle Rain to Running Bear's lodge, and the 4 children who had once been helpless infants now moved through their world with the confidence of young people who understood their special place in the grand design of spirit and flesh. The Chronicle Stone, a sacred artifact that appeared only during times of profound spiritual significance, had materialized in the center of the village, its surface inscribed with symbols that recorded the family's story for future generations. Bright Moon, now 11 summers old, had grown into her role as a bridge between the living and the spirits with grace that amazed the tribal elders. Her ability to see and communicate with those who had crossed over made her invaluable during times of loss, as she could bring messages of comfort from deceased relatives to their grieving families. But more than that, she had learned to teach others how to open their own spiritual sight, sharing the gift that had been given to her birth. Strong Wolf, at 10 summers, had become the protector his name suggested, but his strength manifested in ways that honored his mother's gentle heart. He could calm violent storms with his presence, ease the fears of wounded animals, and bring peace to conflicts that threatened to divide the community. Warriors sought his blessing before dangerous journeys, knowing that his prayers carried special power to ensure safe returns. The twins, Swift Arrow and Singing Wind, now 9 summers old, had developed into a partnership that served their people in remarkable ways. Swift Arrow's ability to sense events before they occurred, combined with Singing Wind's gift for carrying messages through song across vast distances, created a communication network that connected their band with Apache communities throughout the region. Their coordinated abilities had prevented raids, warned of harsh weather, and facilitated trade relationships that brought prosperity to their people. Running Bear, now a man whose hair showed silver threads but whose spirit had been renewed by the love he shared with 2 remarkable women, had become a spiritual leader whose wisdom was sought by Apache bands far beyond his own village. His understanding of how love could transcend the boundaries between worlds made him uniquely qualified to counsel those struggling with loss, and his example had changed how his people approached death and remembrance. Gentle Rain remained the luminous bridge between worlds, her transformed nature allowing her to facilitate ongoing connections between the living and the dead that enriched the spiritual life of their entire community. Through her, grandparents could continue guiding their descendants, healers who had crossed over could share new knowledge with those who carried on their work, and the accumulated wisdom of generations remained accessible to those who needed it most. Morning Star's spirit, no longer bound by the urgency that had driven her to ensure her family's survival, had found peace in watching her children grow into the extraordinary individuals she had dreamed they would become. Her presence in their lives had evolved from desperate protection to gentle guidance, offering wisdom when requested but allowing them the freedom to make their own choices and learn from their own experiences. The village had become a pilgrimage destination for Apache families seeking spiritual healing, guidance, or simply the confirmation that love was stronger than death. The presence of Running Bear's family had attracted beneficial spirits that protected the entire community, creating a sanctuary where the traditional Apache way of life could flourish even as the outside world brought increasing pressures for change. Chief Standing Bear, now an old man whose own time to cross over approached, had designated Running Bear as his spiritual successor, recognizing that leadership in the changing world would require someone who understood both traditional wisdom and the new spiritual realities that the family's choice had brought into being. The Chronicle Stone continued to grow, new symbols appearing on its surface whenever significant spiritual events occurred. Tribal historians had learned to read its inscriptions as a living record of how the Apache people's understanding of life, death, and love had evolved through exposure to the miraculous example of one family's refusal to let death diminish their connections to each other. As the sunset painted the sky in colors that reminded everyone present of Morning Star's radiant beauty, the family gathered around their fire as they had countless times before. The children shared stories of their day's adventures and spiritual discoveries, while Running Bear and Gentle Rain listened with the contentment of parents who had learned that love, guided by wisdom, could overcome any obstacle. "Tell us again about how you found each other," Bright Moon requested, settling beside Gentle Rain with the easy affection of a daughter secure in her mother's love. And so, as the stars emerged to bear witness to another day in their extraordinary life, Running Bear began the story that had become legend. A tale of love that refused to be conquered by death, of choices made in faith rather than fear, and of how sometimes the most impossible paths led to the most beautiful destinations. The story would continue as long as love endured, carried forward by children who had learned that the boundaries between worlds were far more flexible than most people imagined, and that the greatest gifts often came disguised as the greatest challenges.